Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the SIMSA Lunch and Learn. Today we have Peter Lucas Project Management presenting on something called Mining Water on the Moon, which I'm all sure we're very curious to see what's going to be happening on this one. I know I am. This is what I'm excited about. I also see in our participant list some interesting characters, some old friends of SIMSA. Mr. Nowakowski, I see is here. I see Kirsten Marcia, the CEO of Deep, which is a really exciting energy project in Saskatchewan. Wonderful to have you on board today. Anyway, enough from me. Let's turn over to Jarrett and Brandon, and away we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. Really appreciate everyone who's on the line today for taking the time to join us for a little bit and talk about this kind of interesting, exciting new venture that Jared and I have found ourselves in. So just over the course of the next hour or so, or 45 minutes maybe, we'll be talking a little bit about our company, Peter Lucas Project Management, and then jump in to share with you what we can about or what we know about space mining and this exciting future venture that we've got ourselves in. So just a quick land acknowledgement. We're very blessed and fortunate to be welcome to live and make our living off Treaty 6 territory, the traditional homeland of the Métis, here in beautiful Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Also, just a quick pause to a quick safety moment that we gave this presentation, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, and something very interesting happened. We were Zoom bombed, which meant some kind of unsavory people from the internet somehow snuck into our call, and they actually took control of the presentation and the audio and started writing, I would say, inappropriate things across the computer screen and pumping some inappropriate audio through everyone's headphones. And so, in this new weird and digital world that we find ourselves living in today, safety means something a little bit different than it did perhaps a year ago. And it's important, I guess, to also consider the psychological safety of ourselves and our staff. And in the digital format is as well, it applies here as well. So things like, having security measures in place for calls like this, such as passwords, etc., can really make a big difference. So without further ado, I'll introduce my colleague and friend, Jared Peterson, and we can get going on the presentation.
So to tell the story of how we ever got into space mining, I want to start at the very beginning and first introduce you to Peter Lucas. Now, we often get asked, who is Peter Lucas? And if you are curious, he's a Polish-American actor who has been in support roles such as the Russian reporter in Independence Day, and he was a Russian buyer in Jet Li and DMX's Cradle to the Grave back in 2003. But actually, that's not where we got the name from. In fact, it's just a mashup of my name and my cousin Luke Boyle's name, Peter from Peterson, Lucas from Luke, and it's as simple as that. So now, both Luke and I, we come from farming backgrounds. We both played hockey growing up in small towns, along with every other sport that exists in a small town. And we were in 4-H together, lived together in university, both moved out to Calgary after university, and both ended up finding our ways back home. But in our careers, we found success by living true to our values that we were brought up with, providing high quality work, being honest and fair, and just working hard. So in 2011, we decided to take a risk from our comfortable career path and focus on being project managers for hire. Now, in 2013, we ended up picking up another keen engineer and project manager, Connor Regier. About a year later, we ended up hiring our first employee, still our #1 employee, Bradley Jason, and seeing more opportunities with that same optimism and confidence that we founded the company with. We hired a business development person in 2015 just to continue to grow. By the time 2017 rolled around, we had a number of opportunities that were in front of us, and we knew that they weren't going to happen unless we took the leap. So in August of 2017, I left my billable role and began learning the skills necessary to run a business. Things like sales, marketing, HR and recruitment, business development, all of this was brand new. But we came up against a lot of challenges that we hadn't faced before, but we ended up overcoming everything. And, ultimately we were able to succeed. So this is kind of the mindset that we carry forward today. Now, 2 years later, 2019, we recognized that we needed more horsepower on the people management side of the business. And that's when we brought in friend and colleague Brandon Harris here. So that's allowed us to keep growing. And we've gotten to a point now where we have 33 full-time staff across the Peter Lucas group of companies.
And we've really found that success, I think, by making our clients and our staff always our primary focus. We're a people organization, and it's about humans and human connection, and that's kind of the basis of our success. Now, one thing we've learned from our clients is that they're incredibly busy. We've had our best success giving them exactly what they need and want, and as conveniently as possible. And we've learned that our staff thrive and serve clients best when they're well supported and they bring the skills and an attitude that enhance the client team abilities. So out of these experiences, we've just recently developed our newest and most ambitious project to date that's intended to better serve our clients and our staff, and we call it the Peter Lucas Bench. And the Peter Lucas Bench is basically an online portal where our clients get instant access to our entire roster of exceptional project talent. At peterlucasbench.com, qualified individuals can express their interest in looking for their next exciting career opportunity, but with complete confidence and anonymity, which allows best people to look for work before they're actually looking for work. Clients then have first access to this top talent before anyone else. Everyone at peterlucasbench.com is fully vetted through resume screening, interviews, reference checks to our high standards. Every bench candidate is evaluated on 37 unique competency areas and across 5 personality dimensions that allows us to match client needs with people that bring the knowledge and approach to maximize their project success. Peter Lucas clients get access to all of this material at their fingertips 24/7. So to see how easy it is to find these world-class project managers, schedulers, administrators, construction managers, check out peterlucasbench.com.
Now, when we brought Brandon on, we spent some time, looking at the future plans for our team. How could we use our existing talents, skill sets, and passions towards exciting and lucrative future markets? Something we could be proud of, and that would also help our families, our communities, and ultimately just leave the world a better place. So based on this conversation, with our primary focus still, of course, being serving our Peter Lucas clients, we began focusing on a few other different growth areas, which now include a portfolio of companies in the project management, mining, and aggregate supply sectors. We have an incredible team, and with our space mining venture, we have fused our passion for people, space, and for our expertise in mining to begin investigating how Western Canada can join this quickly growing sector.
So I'll talk a little bit about the dream. Now more than I think any time, at least in the course of my life, motivators for space development feel really clear. So the incredible legacy of human accomplishment in some ways hangs in the balance. An errant asteroid or one wrong person with the nuclear codes has the risk of wiping out millions of years of evolution of life and everything we've collectively created as a species, basically. And I don't really think this keeps many people up at night, and it doesn't keep me up at night anyway, but from a pure risk management perspective, it does make sense to diversify where we live. But life just simply cannot exist off-planet without off-planet resources. It's simply too expensive and too damaging to sustain that life off Earth by blasting everything out of Earth's gravity well. Now, from an economic perspective, invariably all aspects of mining in space and mining here on Earth require economic opportunity. And we'll touch on that a lot more a bit later in the presentation. But just as a reference point, as recently as a couple months ago, there was an article in Forbes magazine about an asteroid whose value was estimated at something like $10 quintillion based on all the rare earth and precious metals that were on it. Long story short, the article completely ignored any supply-demand laws, but it was a shocking enough dollar value to make a pretty good headline. Now, from an environmental perspective, there are reasons to mine off Earth. I think we're still probably decades away from the Jeff Bezos vision of doing all mining and manufacturing off Earth in order to preserve our planet, but there are a lot of shorter-term benefits. For example, the space economy right now is worth about $500 billion. And every ounce of fuel and materials used by the thousands of satellites must be lifted from the Earth, which is an expensive and damaging exercise. You've all seen rocket launches. That is, that's a lot of emissions that are being pumped into the atmosphere every time a rocket takes off. So obtaining fuel and materials off Earth will significantly reduce the environmental impact of space activities, which are just growing all the time. And finally, as throughout the entire history of humanity, there's value to the advancement and of science and humanity. JFK famously said, "We go to space not because it's easy, but because it's hard." Chasing a great frontier like space is a great unifying undertaking for people. And, but there are tons of other tangible benefits here on Earth from the work that has been done in space in the past and continues to be done today. Things like climate research, global positioning systems, satellite radio, the introduction of global internet access and technological advancements. There are other things that are made for space travel, but that we use today. And a few of these examples include ear thermometers, cordless tools, memory foam, and those are just some consumer goods, but these same principles apply across all sectors in less obvious ways. Bottom line, though, is technology that we develop for mining in space provides a return on investment on Earth mining applications long before we're actually mining the cosmos.
So the new space race. Now, the expansion of the space industry is all around us today. Private industry is a big differentiator in this new space race, with companies seemingly popping up left, right, and center to try to take advantage of what many expect will become a huge commercial economic opportunity. Some of the world's biggest companies and their billionaire founders, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, they're already all making investments into the space sector. The federal government is basically directing all resources towards ways that Canada can participate in the Artemis program, which is NASA's plan to return humans to the surface of the moon by 2024 and establish a permanent human presence by 2028. Now, Canada, of course, has a very high profile in this endeavor, and Canada will be the second country in the history of the world to send a human to the moon, which is pretty cool. And we're in a unique position to participate in this industry.
So what is Saskatchewan's unique position? Well, as you're all, I guess, probably closely aware, Saskatchewan is not completely unlike outer space. And that's driven some technological advancements over the history of mining in our province. So we have remote areas that demand remote exploration techniques, autonomous or semi-autonomous mining technology. We have familiarity working in environments with limited infrastructure, things like limited communication systems, positioning systems. There's no GPS a kilometer underground in a potash mine. We have extreme climates. Saskatchewan mining innovators use extraction methods that not only accommodate, but actually in a lot of cases can leverage those extreme conditions to our benefit. Saskatchewan has one of the most abundant and diverse resource bases on the planet. Platinum-based metals, precious metals, rare earth minerals, energy resources. We are good at mining these things, and it turns out that they are valuable and both and are abundant in high-grade deposits in outer space. Now, if you consider Western Canada in a broader sense, we're also in, I would say, a depressed market, especially considering the energy sector. There's a lot of very talented people who are either unemployed or not fully utilized. We should be looking at ways to get those people back to work and doing what they're really good at. So just a couple examples here. In a report published in 2020 by the Fraser Institute, they place Saskatchewan as the #3 most attractive mining jurisdiction in the world. Mining Journal's Intelligence World Risk Report ranks Saskatchewan as the very best, from a risk perspective, very best mining jurisdiction in the world. Now, our place in Canada also contributes a lot to that competitive advantage. So in any given year, 60% of all exploration capital in the world flows through Canada. We have the financial and legal infrastructure to handle major mining-related undertakings, and we do it all the time. Canadians are well known for the world leadership in exploration, mining, and extraction techniques. And finally, Canada just brings a strong reputation and political stability that does make it attractive for domestic and foreign investment. So going back 14 months, our idea as of January 2020 was that all of these forces kind of place Western Canada at a tangible competitive advantage to take mining off Earth, do what we do here out there. And the short to medium payback would be that the tech developed for that future space mining activities would be used here on on-Earth applications to help us compete at the global scale. It was that simple.
So what did the first chapter of that journey look like? Well, how does anything start? And I guess for us, it all begins with speaking to people. So in January of last year, we basically started requesting meetings with anyone and everyone that we knew that worked in exploration, mining technology, space, grant writing, research, and we started attending conferences, such as the ConvergeX conference that you can see in your background there. It seemed that every conversation that we had led to about 15 others, and there were a lot of people that were interested and a lot of people that were highly skeptical. But everybody was very gracious with their time, and it was a lot of fun. In just a couple of months, we were able to learn a ton about space mining and met some really key partners in this potential future. So, for example, the individual who's second from the left on panel number 8 there in the background, his name's Sam Reed. Now, when we were speaking to him, and he does a lot of consulting for NASA as well as the Canadian Space Agency. And he had this story where he was talking about this competition that he had entered through NASA, where they were trying to solve the challenge of if an asteroid is hurtling towards the Earth and humanity is going to be wiped out, what do we do? Well, most of his competitors basically said, well, you just go there and blow it up. And that's, problem solved. But he was able to look at it from a slightly different approach and say, well, actually, all you have to do is redirect it, and then it'll miss the Earth and humanity will be saved. And it's this outside of the box thinking that we need right now to be able to solve these problems. Some of the key learnings from this are really just that people do take space mining seriously. There are big players in the market already, and they have a tentative eye on the development of space mining tech. We had the opportunity to speak to CEOs and senior executives of space companies and the mining companies as well. And, there are brilliant people doing amazing work in the tech sector in Canada as well, And this includes, of course, the Canadarm, for which our space program is primarily known for. However, Canada's contribution is still really only as a niche tech provider. You basically invent something and let another country's space agency utilize it. So at this point, this is where we learned, that's not what we want to do. We want to use our greatest skills, which is basically building ideas into reality to become the tech, business, and market integrator. So we want to be a Canadian company using the junior mining approach to be mining and selling material off of Earth.
So just a couple months into that journey, we hit our first major pivot. Something happened which you may have heard of. It's called COVID-19, and basically wiped out our strategy of meeting and chatting with people overnight, essentially. On top of that, there were impacts to our core business that meant that we had to change the way we do things as well. Now, it's really difficult to create excitement and vibe from something as forward-looking as space mining, unless people can see the twinkle in your eyes. And so we had to find a new way to continue to have these conversations with experts and connect with people, but now in a digital way. So we did what everyone else does when they get really lonely. We started a podcast. Now, it turns out a podcast is an awesome way to get people to speak with you, people that maybe normally wouldn't necessarily have time for a couple of space enthusiasts from small town Saskatchewan. But over the spring and summer of last year, we got to chat with some just incredible people with amazing ideas, and many of whom will continue to be a big part of our space mining venture for a long time. Plus, it was a ton of fun. An example of one person we spoke with was Daniel Faber, who is the CEO of a company called OrbitFab. And what they do is they are essentially seeking to build gas stations in space and using, generally speaking, water or water-based fuels as the gas to service the satellite industry. Now, he really pushed us towards the notion that there was an immediate market for water in space. He even offered to buy it from us. And as we talked to other people throughout the course of the podcast, it really became clear that water was something that's worth looking at in a lot of detail. So we learned some key things from this phase. The space community is very small, not just in North America, but worldwide. Once you've kind of established yourself as having as a presence in the industry, you really know, you really get to be known and can kind of wrap your arms around everyone else that's in the industry. So it's kind of neat. One thing we learned, that not all barriers are not technical, or all barriers are technical or financial. You know, I think of it, just being an engineer myself, I think of it as such a technical problem. Like, how do we solve the challenges that are part of that are going to allow us to mine whatever it is off of the earth? And but there's also massive legal challenges and huge political barriers that need to be overcome. So it's a really interesting and multifaceted problem. We came to realize, or came to learn, that the precious metal and rare earth space mining sector is probably well out, at least 20 plus years. But again, there's a near-term opportunity potentially in water, and also a shorter-term opportunity in helium.
So I guess our second pivot, you know, based on what we saw as this long-term 1000x opportunity, as well as near-term revenue opportunity, we decided to make our first tangible push into our space mining adventure, and we partnered with another like-minded individual from Alberta and founded the Lunar Water Supply Company. Now, water is incredibly useful. It's incredibly versatile, and it wears many hats in space. You know, you're able to split it into both hydrogen and oxygen, and you can create the necessary life support systems to create, or to keep our astronauts alive. It's also a very effective radiation shield, and it can also be used as propellant. So there's an ongoing study of the surface of the moon, I guess the ongoing study, which establishes kind of like the locations where there is water, and it's in the permanently shadowed regions, as well as sprinkled randomly throughout the surface regolith, but there's a high likelihood that there are also higher grade, basically, ore deposits in the subsurface formations. Now, getting stuff to space is incredibly hard. When you send a rocket to space, approximately 96 to 98% of the mass to get that out of Earth's gravity well is just the fuel and the rocket ship itself, which means you only have, like, at best 2 to 4% of that mass in payload. So this is why in situ resource utilization is so important. You don't want to have to bring the stuff to space. You want to use what's already there. And this has been humanity's approach for as long as humanity has existed, using the resources that are locally available for survival. Now, what you'll see here is a liter of water, a liter of fresh, delicious water. And if you're NASA, to bring that liter of water using modern rocket technology today costs about $4,500, which is actually a steal. Now, there's a private company out there who is offering 1 kilogram payloads to the moon with the hefty price tag of $1.5 million. To carry that same liter of water from the Earth to low Earth orbit, say the International Space Station, for instance, it's closer to about $2,800. And again, private industry is charging around $20,000 per liter. So to carry a liter of water from the surface of the moon to low Earth orbit, its estimated cost about $1,700. So if you can produce water on the moon for under $1,100, there's a business case for its use as propellant. And if you can produce it for under $4,500 a liter, well, there's an incredible economic opportunity there.
So the obvious next question is, how much water could we possibly need in space? I mean, there's only a couple astronauts living up there at any given time. And the answer is a lot more than you might think. The market for water, or water-based fuel in space today, if it was readily available, would be about 250,000 liters. And so based on the growth of the satellite industry, which is thousands and thousands of satellites being launched every year, think SpaceX Starlink, who the endeavor to cover the blanket the entire surface of the Earth in high-speed internet. They're putting up thousands of satellites a year. And so the opportunities for satellite servicing and refueling is expected to grow that demand to 1.3 million liters, or half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, by 2025. Now, by 2030, that number is expected to double up to about the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool every single year. So you need to get a pool of water up to space once a year, and the cost to do that is about $1.2 billion. But those numbers pale in comparison to the water that's going to be required to support the Artemis mission that Jared was talking about. Of course, there's nothing there on the moon right now, so the demand is zero. But if Artemis goes forward as scheduled, by 2025, the expected demand for water on the surface of the moon is going to be about 5 million liters. And that's 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of water required for lunar surface operations. Now, the cost, now by 2030, which is only 9 years away, that number is expected to jump to 5 Olympic-sized swimming pools, or 13 million liters of water. And the cost to lift that water from the surface of the Earth would be about $40 billion. And NASA's entire budget for 2021 is $42 billion. So obviously there's a need to find different ways to get water on the surface of the moon. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit further out into the future. That was the next 9 years, and here's the next 30. So the blue bar there includes the demand projections for water, both in low Earth orbit and on the moon. And this does not include demand for water on Mars. If you've done some reading about interplanetary settlement, you'll note quickly that moon isn't the ultimate target. Most places, including the United States, have their eyes firmly fixed on Mars. But moon is that good intermediary location that will serve as an outpost to ultimately move the next efforts to Mars. So by 2050, it's fully expected that that we'll have moved on from the moon to Mars, but the demand at the moon will still be there. Now, we're not just making these numbers up. They're pulled from an economic study that was published by WGM, which is a Canadian geological consulting firm, and they were published in August of 2019. Which was in response to NASA's announcement of the Artemis program. So that's the demand increasing up to 2050. And kind of following that line is the expected total cost to blast that water from the surface of the Earth. So by 2030, that number is somewhere between $40 and $60 billion. But by 2050, we're talking about $140 billion a year in order to supply these missions. In that same report, they theorized a cost of producing water on the moon, and they said it would be about $500,000 a liter. So that gray line represents the cost to supply water anywhere it's needed in space, essentially, if it's from the surface of the moon. And you can really get a sense here of just how much harder it is to lift things off the Earth than it is to lift them off the moon. But basically the difference between those lines is the market opportunity. Now the price is going to fall somewhere in there, and there's obviously some variability in the rocket technology that affects kind of the cost of lifting it out of the atmosphere. But by 2030, the opportunity is in the tens of billions of dollars. But by 2050, we're talking in the hundreds of billions of dollars of potential market opportunity.
Now, the Lunar Water Supply Company intends to basically operate as a utility on the moon, providing reliable, cost-effective, high-quality water in market volumes. Now, we aren't the only ones who are looking at water on the moon, obviously. In fact, NASA has put out a number of challenges and competitions to develop ideas and technology to extract water from the lunar regolith. Now, it's generally not a great idea to try to compete with NASA, but their plan is basically as follows. Land a rover with an excavator on the moon, dig up the surface regolith that has very low concentrations of water, and then process the heck out of it. First cup of water is likely to be produced in this fashion, but these are low production facilities that are expected to only produce about 250 tons of water a year. And the demand by 2025 will be 5,000 tons. So operations will need to scale up significantly in order to meet this. And since NASA nor the other space agencies have any type of mining background, this is an incredible opportunity for mining companies, suppliers, and service providers to get involved. Now, our plan is a bit different than NASA's, and it's theorized that there are vast high-grade deposits of water which have been deposited near the surface of the moon through impacts with icy asteroids. After completing exploration missions, we want to use basically land a space-grade drill onto the surface of the moon, and using similar techniques and methods that are already used in Western Canada, reach the high-grade deposits using the applicable methods. This includes things like SAGD and enhanced oil recovery and solution mining principles, all of these requiring drilling technologies, which we're world class in. And then we can scale up production to 100x of what NASA's capabilities are. It's that easy.
So just to give you a lay of the market, right now there's kind of two groups on a global scale that are looking at going to the moon and using the resources that are available there. One group is Russia and China. China just landed a rover on the moon not that long ago, and Russia obviously has a long and storied history with space travel. So that's one group. And then the other group is the one that Canada is a part of, which is North American. Obviously, NASA is a leader there. Europe, Western Europe, through the European Space Agency, and Australia. And their approach is basically follows the Artemis program, as we kind of talked about already, to get people to the moon by 2024 and a permanent base by 2028. Now, coming back a little bit closer to home, there are actually 3 companies in Canada that are looking at this and actively pursuing it. Our Lunar Water Supply Company is one of those 3, but our approach is quite unique, actually, that we are chasing the challenge really from a mining perspective rather than a traditional space approach that focuses kind of on the robotics and aerospace. It's our philosophy, or it's our belief, that we can get those services from existing providers, but it's the mining component and the efficient extraction that we have the competitive advantage here in Western Canada. So a little bit more about the current situation. Canada is a little bit behind on the policy and legislation side, although it's not so far that we can't quickly make it up. In 2015, the United States passed a U.S. Commercial Space Launch Competitiveness Act, and that has allowed them to actually award already 4 different contracts for the collection of space resources. This is already happening, and in the States is really at the leading and bleeding edge of that. In 2017, Luxembourg passed a law that allowed the use of space resources for companies that are basing themselves in Luxembourg. 2019, the European Union's European Space Agency published multiple positions on the commercialization of space resources, including a space resource strategy. In 2019, the United Arab Emirates passed a federal law on the regulation of the space sector, which contains some provisions governing the commercial use of space resources. And they have a national space strategy that includes plans for space resources. Back closer to home, I would say to date, it's fair to say that the in-situ resource utilization, space mining, hasn't really been prioritized for federal research funding. So Natural Resources Canada has actually identified off-Earth mining as being one of their growth areas for the Canadian mining industry under their kind of New Frontiers umbrella. And they've also identified mining technology development as a priority area. Well, this, the space mining approach that we are proposing and talking about is kind of an excellent fusion of those two things: development of the technology to give Western Canadian miners, or Canadian miners in general, a competitive advantage on the world stage, and also set ourselves up to one day mine off the Earth. The Canadian Space Agency, they have traditionally, throughout the history of the agency, been really focused on aerospace, defense, and robotics. And so, this notion of in situ resource utilization is, I won't say foreign to them, but they're not really set up to support it. We had some conversations with the Canadian Space Agency, and they didn't even know what a junior mining company was or how it works. So there's a big gap there in knowledge between what we need of those federal agencies and what they're currently providing. So I'll just talk really quickly about where we stand today. We have a long-term plan that maps out our path from, Saskatchewan to the moon, but in our immediate focus, we've got a couple small projects going on. So one is a lunar data platform that's actually just compiling all of the data from around the world, all the different research facilities, geological data of the surface of the moon, into one place where we would actually sell the information in a consumable manner to research institutions, and ourselves use it to do geological modeling and research of the lunar surface. And another thing we're working on just with the University of Saskatchewan as a capstone design project for fourth year mechanical engineers is a lunar surface mining simulator. Obviously, a lot of the tech that we're going to have to use on the surface of the moon, we're going to want to de-risk it by trying it here and not blasting it up to the moon first at 1.5 million per kilo. And so we're kind of in early development of a design of a simulator that, we can try things like heat diffusion, heat dissipation, and, even modeling the friction that'll be different from the lunar regolith than on any material on Earth. Another thing we're working on is strategic partnerships. We're talking with individuals, education institutions, other companies that have some expertise in moon geology and planetary science. We don't have that. We're going to need to get people involved that have that background and knowledge. Then exploration missions, one of the first steps, tangible steps, is we're going to have to explore. We're going to have to, at some point, have some more data on the makeup and where these kind of high-grade deposits lie under the surface of the moon. So we're going to be finding partners that can work with us on that as well. Now, something else that's interesting is we're working with the satellite servicing company right now to try and establish an offtake agreement. They've expressed interest in buying water for servicing the satellite industry, and I think as soon as we can get some of that infrastructure in place and perhaps an offtake agreement, it'll really send a strong message to potential funders and to the federal government that they really need to take that action that's going to allow us to actually participate as Canadian companies in this interesting and emerging sector. So back to the action from the federal government, there's really two things that we need. We need them to create a policy framework to give us maybe not a competitive advantage, but at least a fighting chance. We have to catch up to the other countries that are leading the way in the world. There's not many opportunities to get into this sector at the ground floor. And if we want to maintain our status as a world leader in mining, I think this helps us both up in space and here on Earth. And then we'd be looking for the government to help de-risk some of the research, like from an investment perspective, to advance that Western Canadian tech under the umbrella of some of those new frontiers and under National Resource Canada's strategic goals. We have an ask for you today. We've drafted a letter to the federal government and are planning to send it to NRCan, the Canadian Space Agency, members of Parliament, provincial legislators, basically anyone that'll listen. So right now, the Canadian Space Agency is undergoing a formal consultation process that's going to determine their future priorities. And so it's a limited time. We have till the end of March to provide our input. And what we're looking for is other companies in Western Canada to, like ourselves, and to throw their names behind this initiative and ask these two things of the government. One is to move on creating the legislation that allow us to begin planning and pursuing financing for resource extraction on the moon and Mars. So there's some nuance to that, but generally speaking, it's, we need legislation that allows us to secure tenure of resources off Earth. We have to be able to have the rights to some material if we're going to be able to pursue it and pursue financing for it. And another is to adopt maybe standardized resource evaluation criteria. So other countries are working on that, and Canada needs to be participating in that process as well. And secondly, we are asking the federal government to allocate grant dollars to develop mining technology in Saskatchewan towards things that we're going to ultimately use in space, but things that are going to provide a competitive advantage in Saskatchewan today. There's real money that's going into the space sector right now, and none of it flows west of Kitchener-Waterloo. It basically all gets gobbled up by companies trying to supply, space pens to the International Space Station instead of real tech that we can use on Earth today in our mining to make it more energy efficient, to make it more autonomous, to improve reliability. There's so many opportunities there that we can leverage through the federal government. So Jared's going to drop a link in the chat if he hasn't done it already. If you feel so inclined, I would greatly appreciate if you could find a moment to read our letter. It's very short, and sign your name and potentially your organization support to our letter that's requesting these things of the federal government.
All right, so this has been our journey so far as we've looked towards shifting mining into outer space. Now, for us, it all comes back to the dream, doing something of consequence that can positively affect the world. Our plan to positively affect the world is to build up a strong and resilient community, because the rising tide floats all ships. So this is why we're pushing to have Saskatchewan and Western Canada become the global hub for future mining developments. We can develop, pilot, test, and utilize all of this technology locally, and we have the experience, expertise, and plain old grit to be able to pull it off. But we know that we aren't going to be able to do this alone. We know that we need a strong and diverse team of talented people and partners in order to succeed. Innovation needs diversity, different people with different perspectives and ideas to create solutions to solve these complex problems that no one has ever solved before. And that forms the basic philosophy for both Peter Lucas Project Management and the Lunar Water Supply Company. So we would like to thank Eric and the team at CIMSA for having us here today, everybody else for joining, listening in, hopefully learning some things about space mining. If you want to check out our websites, peterlucas.ca, peterlucasbench.com, lunarwatersupplycompany.com. We specialize in matching high quality people who can integrate directly into your team to enhance your team's capabilities. And we would love the opportunity to be able to demonstrate the capabilities of the bench. So if you wanted to ever set up a demo with us, feel free to just reach out. Also, there's the podcast, Unearthed, Demystifying Space Mining. If you search that across any of the major podcast platforms, it'll show up. And hopefully, again, there's a few things to learn there, and follow us at the Twitter handle @SpaceUnearthed. And we're on all the major social media channels, I guess. So if you ever want to reach out to us, there's our email addresses. We'd love to learn, or if you'd like to learn more, I guess, about this topic, we can also, set up a similar lunch and learn or something like that. And again, we would truly appreciate your support in signing the letter to the CSA to get Western Canada involved in this future. The government has already told us that they are well aware of the economic justification as well as the sustainability and social benefits of in situ resource utilization in space, but they can't act unless industry tells them what to do. So this is our letter telling them what to do. So thank you. Over to you, Eric.
Well, thank you, Jared and Brandon. It's great to see this today. I'm going to share something really quickly, and I'm just in case some of our members are thinking this is kind of a long ways off. There's a photo that you need to see, and I'm sharing it now. It should be coming up on your screens if you can let me know when it's there.
It's there.
Okay, this photo was taken at Prairie Machine, obviously, almost a year ago today. The lady in the middle is in charge of procurement for NASA, for Boeing at NASA, for the International Space Station and the trip to Mars. The lady to her right, right beside Kip Sikunyak there, is in charge of all supplier diversification for all of Boeing. They were here in Saskatchewan for 4 days last summer, or actually February, looking at suppliers and things like that for from Saskatchewan. So they were here, they are looking, and they took time, like days out of their schedule to come here. So it's a bit of a reality, folks, that this is actually happening, and there's a lot of truth to this. So I just thought I'd share that image. It was kind of neat to see. They're also over at Ken Stenenko's place there, Croatia Industries, and some others places. So it was quite a thing to have them here in town. Traditionally, at this point, we also open things up for questions. If there's any questions, there's a chat. Feel free to open your mic as well if you want. Maybe raise your hand. It's up to you. I'll just leave it open for a bit here. And I know that one of the things I've seen, that I'm curious to know about is what the plan is with the federal government for staking claims. On how do you stake claims? Do we go back to 1800s where you drop your stake into the ground and hammer it in and put your name on it, or will our international trade agreements work on the moon and such like, or asteroids and that sort of thing? That may be kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, actually, there's an outer space treaty that was intended to prevent World War III from happening over outer space disagreements, and so that outer space treaty basically said that no one could own anything off of Earth, which now, I mean, at the time it was I think it was well intentioned, but now it actually gets in the way of some of these initiatives that we've talked about, and so countries are starting to move away from that, and that's what the United States has done. That's what that's what Luxembourg is working on in the United Arab Emirates. They're really working at finding a way to move past those old treaties to what is the framework actually going to look like in the future? Because you'd hate to not be able to reap those benefits just because of a 50-year-old treaty that no longer really serves its purpose.
Well, I see some congratulations on a great presentation and such like. Can you share your information? And if you need it online, if people have a problem, they can always reach out to myself directly, and I can connect you guys as well. I'm just looking to any questions coming in. I don't see anything. Yeah, lots of congratulations coming in. Oh, there's a question here. Do you anticipate any future challenges to developing lunar resources, i.e. environmental, etc.?
Yeah, well, I guess what environment we're talking about, the Earth environment, our home where we live, and I think we stand to benefit from the development of these lunar resources. As I kind of mentioned in the presentation, if we can take stuff from the moon and bring it to low Earth orbit, or keep it locally at the moon instead of blasting it out of Earth, there's some significant environmental benefits. But also just think of the environmental benefits of developing this tech for use in the mining sector today. Energy efficiency is going to be critical to moon mining, and so clean energy. These things are initiatives that we're doing anyway, that we're working on anyway, and they are in direct alignment with what we're going to end up having to do on the surface of the moon. So I think there's a really strong alignment between current sentiment towards environmental improvement and also this space mining endeavor.
Well, yeah, I know from the lunar missions, the handheld calculator was one of the spin-offs of that because they needed to shrink that. Corningware, cookware was a spin-off of the trip to the moon, that kind of thing. There was a lot of technological developments that came out of it. The need to make things smaller and lighter and better. Is any other questions here? Not yet. Here we go. I'm wondering, if these ideas are applicable to other planets, is the first goal to shoot for the moon or grow technologies and capabilities from there?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, all of this is basically like a pilot for settlement on Mars. So that's why, like, the moon is kind of the testing grounds for that. So essentially, if we can develop this technology, there's an even greater market to be able to utilize that, further down in the future.
Okay, folks, any more questions? I know you got some out there because people are kind of scratching. I can see people virtually scratching their heads. Oh, okay. What is this? The level of certainty that there's actually substantial water resources on the moon? Is there real evidence available?
So I would say that in the testing that's been done, the two proven sources are in the permanently shadowed areas of the on the poles, and the pole is an ideal place to land a spacecraft. It's actually quite costly because you have to change the orbit trajectory, which takes a lot of energy. I'm not a move around in space person, but I know that there's real reasons why that's not an ideal place to actually set up the long-term lunar base. That's one source. The other source of water is in low concentrations, just mixed into the regolith. So they have one data point that showed, I think it was 0.2% of water concentration loose in the regolith of the surface of the moon. And so those are all the data there is right now. There's actually way more data about water prevalence on Mars than there is on the moon. And so we're learning stuff new all the time. But the theory that there's been water deposited in those icy impacts is what a lot of scientists in the area that's going to be the next area of exploration is, okay, well, where are these deposits? What is the concentration? What is the grade? So that's where a lot of focus is turning in research these days.
So the terminology you traditionally have used for assessing coal and diamond and oil deposits are applying now to water. We have your provable and probable resources and such like.
Yeah.
4301 SP of some form. I don't know what that would be called. Any more questions out there, folks? If you want to just unmute your microphone, you can ask that way as well. Going once, going twice, go on. Well, thank you, folks. I believe there's no more questions. If there are, we can always circle back with any of us, and we'll get you connected in the end. So thank you to Peter Lucas Project Management for a really interesting conversation of anybody in business development should have been looking at this going, well, there's a market I haven't tapped yet. So thank you very much. Have a great day, folks. Have a safe afternoon and a great weekend, and enjoy the warmer weather. And it looks like we're all going to have our first vaccinations by the end of July, I believe they said now. So it's a good world. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.